Okay, so this is Fusion. Um, Everything kind of works off of a sketch. I'm going to create a sketch here, and you pick a plane that you want to work on. I always pick this one. It really doesn't matter which plane you pick. And then at this point, you want to go to Insert, and you choose SVG for your logo. And you go to Insert from my computer. And let me find an SVG. Let me use my logo. Doesn't matter where you place it. I like placing it on the origin center here. I don't know why it does this. Okay. So there's my logo, right? So just like you have a logo, and then you're going to have circle around it, right? So I just did the center circle, and I highlighted here on the center, and I just pulled it out. Okay. So at this point, you see I can select these different areas, right? So what I'm going to do is, let's see how what's the easiest way to do this. Let me simplify this logo a little bit. Just because I'm going to make it a little closer to the simplicity of the one you've got. Okay. So we'll pretend that's basically what you got, right? So first thing I'm going to do is I need to create what's called a solid body. Right, so I select this, and I'm going to select everything but the letters. Right, so I selected the insides of these, right, because they're part of the quote unquote background. Now let's hit finish sketch because I'm done. Oops. And I'm going to hit E for extrude, and it's going to ask me how thick I want to make it. I don't know how thick you made that one, but it looked like it was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2 millimeters. So that's what I'm going to do here. And now you can see it's created a body. It's created everything but the text, because I didn't select the text, right? Every time you do the first extrude in Fusion, it hides the sketch again. But you see I've created these bodies. This is a body, this is a body, and this is a body, and this is a body. You can see them here. I can turn them off. Now you don't see them anymore. So now I'm going to select the letters. Oops. What a bitch. Okay. Bring these bodies back up so you can see what's going on here. I'm hit E again. Also 2 millimeters. On the operation here, though, I want new body, not join. Otherwise, you'll just have one solid disk. So now, if you see, let me hide the sketch. Now, if you see, you can see that there. It's hard to see the line, but there you go. Okay. So I can hide the individual bodies, right? So what I want to do here, easiest way I think would be to hide all the letters and go back to the original 4 bodies created. So now what we want to do is we want to go to S, it's just for shortcuts, and type offset and go to offset face. And now it's going to allow me to select these faces. And you want to do this with all of them. You can do them in any order, but I'm doing them in this order so you can see I'm not missing anything here. It helps to go in order if you know This way you know you're not going to miss anything. And it gets a little harder when these get small, so you got to kind of zoom in. It messed up because I selected something. There. Put it back to 0. But you just want to make sure the face of all of this stuff is blue. Now you can see if I missed, on these curved ones, you end up with multiple faces. So it can be a little tedious at times. Especially when you have a lot of super curvy ones, like that big circular arrow that you've got. That's probably going to have a lot of faces. In retrospect, it probably would have been easier to do this on the other bodies because I wouldn't have been dealing with the inside of this. I would have been dealing with the outside, which probably would have been a little easier to select. So when you do yours, I would do the white parts. Hide the black part and do the white parts. There's probably there's other ways to do this, but it's too complicated to explain how to set it up right now. This is just the least problematic. It just happens to be the most tedious. But there are ways to do this a little easier, or a little quicker, I should say. You just have to set some other stuff up to do it. And I didn't want to try to get into that with you because you have to be a little more familiar with Fusion. Doing that. This is just going through and clicking. So it's tedious and boring, but it works. And it's not complex or setup intensive or specific necessarily to the model, like the other ways of doing this are. I would have been done with this in another way already. But it's a more advanced way, and you're just not familiar enough with Fusion. Did I miss that? I did. And you for this type of edit that we're making, you really don't want to miss one of these faces, because even one of these being out of tolerance could keep part of it from fitting. Unfortunately. I'm almost done. Okay, let's just take a quick look. Yep, I'm good. Okay, so now you see this stupid thing I kept messing up. This is how much you want to offset it. So just for example, if I put 1 here, well, I can't do it. It's when I'm trying to do it. It offset the faces inward 1 millimeter, so you see how it closed them off. We don't want to do that much, so we're going to go minus 0.2. We don't have to put the 0. So what that does, that might have been too much for that guy. Well, on my logo, you see how it's now overlapped here. It was 0.2 is too much for that. Let's do 0 and fix it. That's pretty close. Oh, bitch, I jacked my shit all up now. Putting that 1 jacked it up. That's why it's all jacked up now. That's what I get for trying to show an example. Okay, I won't do that again. Okay, so I'm going to go minus 0.2. Now, it really doesn't like, oh, because my logo is too small. Let's do 0.1. Okay, to 0. I want you to see this. Okay, so watch the size of one of these letters. Like, watch the T. So check the space between the N and the T and the S here. I'm going to do a much smaller number just so I don't mess my shit up. Minus 0.05. Now, if you notice, what happened was all these walls moved in the direction of this arrow, outward. So you see the gap here is smaller. They move closer together. Okay. So you see they've moved closer together. So if I do, let's say I did 0.8. So watch, they'll move even closer together again. Right, so now what I've done now, I'm going to save that. Make all these other bodies visible again. Now, if you look, let me just zoom out. See how they're much easier to see? That's because there's a gap now. See the gap between them? That gap is 0.08. So usually with 3D prints, I do a tolerance of 0.2, minus 0.2. Which should give you enough to snap them in. What I would do, and I'll go ahead and do that and show you. Export. Step file. I like doing step files when I export them out of Fusion because it's a higher resolution than an STL file. So you get better dimension control. But an STL file is, for something like this, is probably okay. Okay, so here's Bamboo Studio. So it's opening, it wants to import the step file. I don't know why my computer's going so slow. What the fuck? Oh. I guess I didn't hit okay. Sure. Okay, so now that I've got this like this, if you slice it and you look at the line type, you see the gap there. So it'll leave you a gap so you have some room to get it in there. They were perfectly flush to each other. You can't get them in there. It's just too tight because you don't have that much granular control over the actual width of the filament walls. So if you go in, it usually by point two, it usually fits okay. It might jiggle around a little bit, but if you're going to glue them in there, it should be fine. Now, I want to show you the difference now that with scaling it versus doing this. So I'm going to go back to Fusion, and this is my offset face operation. I'm going to delete it. So now we're back to the original. Going to export. To okay. Okay. So you notice here, when we slice it, you're not going to see any gaps. Okay, it's all just touching. It just runs together. But if you look in the objects, we still have all the individual objects, right? So let's do this. We're going to assume this is what you did. Split the objects, and then there's the outer circle. I think it's 4, 3. Right? That's what you did, I assume. Oh, shit. That's somewhere down. Z. 3, 4. Okay, I want 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right, so there's your black background, and these are your white letters you want to fit in there. So I don't know if you scaled them each individually or together, but the effect is essentially the same. Let's just merge it, and we'll scale it all as one piece. Let's just say I want to do 99.08%. And then I'm going to recenter it. And I'm going to center this. Now, if you look, it doesn't line up. You know what? Let's do this. Son of a bitch. Let's merge these. It's easier to work with that way. Okay. Hold on. Let me do something here. Let's make this a little easier to look at. Okay. So you notice just select the whole fucking thing. I don't want to do that. Okay, here we go. So no matter how I line it up, it doesn't line up properly anymore. Everything is off just a little bit. So even if I line up the eye, now look. Let's slice it. It's easier to see here. So now you look. See, everything's skewed. There's a big gap here, no gap here. And that's because you changed the actual width and height dimensions You change the dimensions from here to here and here to here rather than here to here. Does that make sense? So what you want to do is you want to change the dimension from this line to this line on all of these. Like this line to this line, that line to that line, this line to this line, not this whole thing to this whole thing, because it ends up scaling this out of proportion with that. And that's what scaling the whole thing does versus an offset face. So see, everything here is uniform. You see these gaps like this, and that's just because it's so small. If I made this bigger, this whole thing bigger, let's do that. It's probably closer to the size of yours. Oh. There we go. So you see that the gaps are uniform all the way around this guy, except for weird places like this point. But you can't help that. I don't know what's going on with this thing here. But if you look, you see all the other gaps. Oh, it's because they got too close together, just like here and here. It's just the nature of my print. I don't know that yours is going to have that issue. My letters were just really close together. But if you look, you see that around the L, the gap is completely uniform. Around this A, the gap is uniform. I knew I can flex fuck faces. But when you look at this one that we scaled, you see it's not uniform. We see a big gap here, a slightly smaller gap here, and then no gap down here. But even if I moved it up to here and over a little bit, you'd still have non-uniform gaps. And that's because you scaled it versus offsetting the face. So I hope that helped. Let me know if you need any more help.